that's when I really woke up and said, when I started this business, I got so busy working in the business. It's not that I was oblivious to growth. I mean, I've been growth minded my whole life until I started my own business.
Hi, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, you get my conversations with peak performing thought leaders, creatives, and entrepreneurs. Every week, I bring you the latest scoop on what these incredible people do to succeed and how you can get their secrets and do it too. If you're enjoying the show, I'd be super grateful if you support the show on Patreon. You get some exclusive and fun bonuses. Go to patreon.com/innovative mindset and join in. And now, let's get on with the show. Hey there, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am super thrilled you're here. I've got to tell you, I'm also really thrilled to welcome this week's guest. And that's in part because I know almost nothing about what it is that he does. Not that I don't know what he does. I know, it's funny, isn't it? But the actual topics that he talks about and he's an expert on is something that's been a mystery to me. So I'm super excited to welcome Jim Adams to the show. Jim is a speaker, online educator, and financial management consultant for small and family-owned businesses. Now you understand why. I'm so excited to have him on here. Nowadays, you're going to find him traveling the country in his RV, and he just had an 8-day vacation. Are you jealous? I'm totally jealous. He's speaking at virtual events, and he's looking for the muddiest, scariest obstacle course race he can find, all while serving his clients and facilitating his Profit Speak online interactive workshops. Jim left his job as a full-time 100% travel consultant to get his life back while better serving small business owners. How awesome is that? His goal is to help you get your business unstuck by helping you be able to better drive your business using your numbers. Welcome, Jim. I'm so glad that you're here.
Yeah, it's so awesome to be here.
This is so great. So, okay. I frankly admit, it's not that numbers scare me. I'm not terrible at math or arithmetic. It's that I find what numbers you need to keep track of as a business owner, as somebody who's an entrepreneur, I find that all very confusing. So when you talk about knowing your numbers or using your numbers, what does it mean to use your numbers? What numbers are we talking about? How does a business owner use them?
Well, obviously, it depends on what kind of business that you have. So most of my clients are like brick and mortar kind of businesses. They make things, they build things, they install things, they have laborers, they have materials that they're dealing with. And so but some of the same principles apply to like an online business, a content marketing business, a creative business. And that is that you need to know what it is that you're selling. You need to know things like what's the average value of a client or the average value of a job. You need to know a list of what I call metrics. There's a term that's used frequently called key performance indicators. That's too many syllables for me. So I just use the word metrics. And so the most powerful thing that you can do right now today is to outline what your metrics are for your business. And the reason why I say today is because financial statements that like scare the bejesus out of most people and are even challenging for me, as an expert in financial management, financial statements are very challenging. And so most businesses, their financial statements, many businesses, I should say, their financial statements are mucked up and or not very useful. And so metrics, on the other hand, like for example, if you have an online business, it's how many visitors do you have? How many people are contacting you? Of the people that are contacting you, how many people are spending money with you, and so on and so forth, all the way down to your bottom line revenue. But one most important number that everybody forgets, and that is profit. And so what profit ends up being in most small businesses, and it's right there on the bottom of your financial statement, okay, where it does not belong, and that is profit. So they put profit on the bottom of the financial statement, and it really, really should be at the top. Like when you start a business, you're going to put your heart, soul, you might be mortgaging your home for that business. You're going to put everything that you have into that business and getting it off the ground. You need to know what profit that you're going to make and then work towards that.
Okay. I love what you just said, and I think it's great. And there were so many things that you said that I'm like, I don't get it. Okay, let's start basic, very small. When you say profit, do you mean what your business can make? Do you mean what you get to take home in your pocket at the end of the week? What does profit mean?
Yes. Okay. So that's a great question. It's basically the money that you're able to spend
Okay.
after all the expenses, your cost of sales, all the expenses of the business have been met. Um, and I say it's what's left over, but it's a number that needs to be planned for. So if you want to have um, $60,000 to meet your expenses, and that's your goal, which that's fine. Starting a business is for your goal to be able to make enough money to pay your expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're transitioning, let's say you're in a job now
Mm-hmm.
and you have a side hustle and you want to, let's say, make $30,000. So um, it just depends, like what that is. It depends on what the inputs and the outputs are. So a lot of businesses out there have very, very little overhead and very few expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, like my business, the cost of sales is about 70, 75%. So it just, anyway, so it's the money that is left after you paid all of your expenses and cost of goods.
Okay. And that includes, let's say you have employees that's paying their salaries, that's or a virtual assistant, let's say, for if you're a small business owner, let's say you have one assistant or a virtual assistant. So all of that money that you would be paying them, that you would be paying in taxes and all of that doesn't count towards what profit is, correct?
Right. That profit, I'll make it very simple.
Okay.
That profit is yours. That's what makes it so important. It's
Yeah.
yours. It doesn't belong to the IRS. It doesn't belong to your employees. It doesn't belong to your vendors. It doesn't belong to your music supply store in your case, or your manager. That is old money. That's
Mm-hmm.
your money.
Mm-hmm.
You can keep and spend and use as you wish. That's your money.
Okay. So if you're a creative person, how do you figure that out? You said this is the number you want to work for. And I'm
Hmm.
really fascinated by this because as you can tell, I know barely the basics about it. So if you say you want to work for it, how do you decide what is the process of deciding what profit you want to make and also what profit you think you can make? Like, what if you want to make a profit of $60,000, but the business you're in or the way you're doing it might only make you a profit of $427? I mean, you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
how do you plan for that? How do you decide that? And then how do you work for it?
Well, let me start off at the very, very beginning, and that
Yay.
is that most people don't even set aside the time to actually think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know you're a very intelligent woman. I've, read some of your materials. I've, listened to some of your podcasts. Obviously, a very, very intelligent woman. If you took the time to actually think about some of these things and how much you get paid to do a job, how much you get paid for a speaking, I know you've done some work for NASA and things like that, how much you get paid for one of those visits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you put those, so in that area, it's what are the different type things that you do. So if you go do a gig at a coffee house,
Mm-hmm.
where it's you and your guitar, so that might pay $500.
Oh, I wish.
I
Okay,
have
go
no
on.
idea. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
it'll be $28 in tips, but go on.
Okay. Okay. And that's a very important thing, is that to be honest with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
is this a business or is this a hobby?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with having a hobby. Okay. If someone has the income, and let's say somebody, wants to do, let's just say coaching, for instance, and they just really want to give and, they want to have somebody to meet their expenses and it's really just a hobby. If they're honest with themselves about that, that's fine. The problem is that if they're thinking that it's a business, but they're not taking the time to think about how many different events that they're going to do, how many jobs that they're going to do, how many, in your case, speaking engagements that you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not taking the time to think about that, then what you have is a hobby, not a business.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Oh, it does. Absolutely. And so, for example, I love that we're talking about this because this is something creative people on the whole, I think need to know more about. We tend to, I think, throw things up in the air and go, "I'm going to grab something and run with it," and that's not necessarily, or according to you, of course, since you're an expert on it, it's not the way to go about having a business. So if I were going to, and I don't play coffee houses nowadays, of course, because of COVID, but also because my guitar's heavy. So let's say I'm working at this and I'm deciding it's going to be a business. What is the first thing that I need to do? Like you said, we need to know our metrics, but I don't know, even like you said, profit is important, but there are probably so many other things in addition to how many clients I might have, how many speaking gigs I might take, how many coaching clients I might need or want in order to make my business work and my business be a business. Where do I begin? What is the first step that I need to do to take? Once I've decided this is no longer a hobby, I want it to be a business, now what?
Okay, so you've already started down the right path and you're starting to think.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like one of your paintings, your beautiful paintings that you do, like for you to create that painting, you have to set aside some time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so a business of any kind,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's Microsoft or whether it's somebody that's playing a guitar or somebody that's selling artwork, um, is creative. It's a creative process.
Mm-hmm.
And
For sure.
so one of the first fundamental questions is, who are your clients and what is it that you're selling? What are the different products that you're selling? So for example, a a uh, a coach has got some different things that they sell. They sell their time, right? Where they're selling an hour for X amount of dollars. They have group events where they're going to do group training of 12 people of 4 sessions, and it's going to be $497. And they have speaking events where they might, work their way up, from $1,500 to $5,000 to $10,000, as their career progresses. Um, they have masterminds, different things like this. And so each one of these different products, if you will, or services,
Mm-hmm.
when you get started, they each have a dollar value. And so just to list out each of those things, and month by, if you're just getting started or wherever your point is that you're doing your planning, month by month or quarter by quarter, how many of each of these are you planning on doing? And then you can add it all up. And so you can work both ends towards the middle. You can say, okay, this year I'm already quitting my job. And so this year my goal is I want to make $60,000 in revenue, and I'm going to spend $10,000 in expenses. And I've got that outline, and I want to end up with $50,000. And so what work do I have to do to meet that number? Okay. You can also start back at the beginning and say, I want to do this many of these different type products and services. And that adds up to X amount of dollars. And you can play around with that. And it takes some time and have a creative process to work both ends towards the middle. And what you can find out is that maybe there's a lot more potential than you realized, is one possibility. Another possibility that a lot of people find out is, oh, this is going to take a lot longer than I thought, or this is going to be a lot more work than I thought.
Interesting. Okay. I love what you just said, that you have to plan either what you want to do or how much you want to make for the next
Mm-hmm.
year or for however long. How do you find out if people want what you do so that you can get those numbers? What do you need to do as a business owner? Or do you need to do market research? Do you need to like sit people down and go, "Hey, I want to brainstorm with you." What's the process for doing that? Like, you were a management consultant, so you were working with companies or businesses that were already established or establishing themselves. Uh, how did you help them grow their businesses when they were new, when they were just getting started?
Yeah, so actually I didn't. I did not work with startups.
Oh,
And
okay. Okay.
I really don't. And so I meet some, and in my travels, I meet a lot of people that are new, and we do have conversations. I would say, um, with a lot of people that are trying to start a side hustle, is like, where do you have game? Like, what is your background? What is it that people are going to pay you for?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what's your experience, and what's the payoff for that? So if you have this coaching session with them, or whatever it is, or they go to your mastermind, what's going to be the value to them? What problems are you helping people solve? Uh, and so that's where it really starts, is what is the problem that's in the market? Who have you talked to that you've determined that that's a problem that needs to be solved? And I can tell you the opposite from personal experience. So
Mm-hmm.
I have not always done this successfully. I came up with this brainchild. I want to say it was 3 years ago when it started. So I have a business called American Landscape Structures,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been bumping along doing between 1 million and 2 million a year for a number of years. And so I thought, well, it would be just great if people could actually see what one of these pavilions was going to look like in their backyard. And I actually found a company that could do this for me. I don't remember if I contacted them or they contacted me. Any like exterior or building product company, whether it's paint or siding or roofing, they hire this company to help visualize their products, or it could be deck material, or pavers, or things like that, home improvement.
Mm-hmm.
They hire this company to visualize their product. And so I hired them. I had it in my head that they were going to, the customer was going to be able to see this pavilion in their backyard, and that this was going to be something that was just going to just double my business, that it was going to be huge, that there was a tremendous demand for this, that people were going to love it. Well, guess what? I didn't really ask a lot of people. It was just my idea. It sounded really cool to me. I didn't really ask a lot of people what the effect was going to be. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not embarrassed anymore. I'm over it. It was $32,000 investment,
Mm-hmm.
and it was total crickets.
Really?
Total crickets. I thought it was just like the coolest thing since sliced bread, and it was a flop. I ended up walking away from it.
Hmm.
So if you are, don't quit your day job until you have talked to some people that have validated, that have validated what it is that you want to do. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to, pour water on anybody's dreams or desires. That's the last thing I want to do. But do make sure that there is a demand for what you do. And one of the things that I did, and you did as well, is we developed a professional network of people that have businesses that we can ask questions, that can speak wisdom into our lives. One of the things that I was suffering from, um, when I made that decision, is it's called smartest guy in the room syndrome.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've heard that before, but
I've heard it. Absolutely. I'm a
yeah,
total
I didn't
know-it-all,
have,
whether or not I deserve to be.
right, right. And so I did not, I was isolated. I didn't have people around me. It really wasn't an ego thing. It was just really just happened by default. When I went into business for myself, I didn't have people around me to speak into me, that like each had their own area of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I didn't validate that. I didn't validate that decision. So, um,
Lesson
yeah,
learned,
that,
right?
right.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, figuring we're living in kind of a different world than we used to, I think. And so much of it is nowadays, what not only what will the market bear, but it seems like it's what are people interested in. And that changes. It's what people are interested in is very, very different than they were 20 years ago. And it's funny, this idea of visualizing a structure in the backyard. There are all of these apps that let you, like, you can visualize what your hair would look like with this color hair if you wanted to change it, or these glasses. You can put your face in the picture and it'll put the glasses on you so you can see what the glasses will look like. And yet for something like, you can see what this gazebo or this other landscape structure would look like in your backyard, for some reason people weren't interested. So when you're in that space of trying to figure out how to proceed, it sounds like you're advocating talk to people. But what if the people you talk to, and this, I suffer from this a little bit, I ask people for opinions and they go, I love it, I love it. And I'm like, no, 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 tear it apart, because I know you like me and I know we're friends and I want you to be honest. And people are like, no, 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 really. And then, of course, there's crickets. So who would you recommend people talk to? Because friends and family aren't always the best, because they are sort of predisposed to love what you're doing, whether or not it's actually worth loving, if you see what I mean. So who are the people you should be reaching out to in order to find out whether or not, or like you said, validate your idea?
Yeah, so the simple answer is successful people. Now, I
I
understand,
love it.
that can be subjective, but I'm involved in a paid mastermind, and so I know if I ask these group of people a question, they've achieved a level of success themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask somebody a question and they've been an employee their whole lives and they've never really achieved anything, and if you're striving to get to six figures or $200,000 a year, you're going to talk to people that are making that, or have checked that box already.
Mm-hmm.
Because what'll happen is that if you talk to people that have an employee mindset or a lesser mindset, they're going to answer your questions based on their own limiting beliefs.
Mm.
And whereas people that have broken that barrier, first of all, they know what a limiting belief is. Okay.
What is a
That's the
limiting
first
belief?
thing. Um, well, a limiting belief is just any belief that limits you. I mean, and it's there's all kinds of books out there and materials out there that have been written on that subject. Psycho-cybernetics is one. Another would be Think and Grow Rich, things like that. So if you talk to people that are already where you want to be, they're going to have crossed that barrier
Mm-hmm.
into that area of challenging and eradicating any limiting beliefs that they had, that basically that any goal that they set for themselves, that they can achieve it.
Ah, that's really cool. Okay, so then that was the first part, getting rid of limiting beliefs, and then what's the next part? What's the next part you should be looking at? People who have already achieved what you want to achieve? Is that the next thing you should be looking for?
The other, yeah, people have achieved what you wanted to achieve, and the other is potential clients.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so I had at my disposal a list of thousands of prospects and about 1,000 previous customers. I mean, I could have put a survey out there, but I was just convinced in my own head that this idea was a winner, and I could have put that out there and gotten some more feedback and done some testing. And then the other it was just I want to say the term is and I may not be able to answer your question if you ask me exactly what it is, but there's a term called confirmation bias.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what it is that you're just looking for information to confirm what you already believe. You're not really open-minded to really have your beliefs challenged. So
Right.
I think
Uh,
that's where I was at that time.
I
And so
get it.
that's definitely a trap to avoid.
Oh yeah, I think for every single person in the world, confirmation bias is a problem that they could fall into, or a
Hmm.
trap, as you said. Okay, so I love that you're what you're saying, and I love how accessible you're making this. And I want to sort of go back a little bit about and talk a little bit about. First of all, I do want to talk about the landscape structure business and how you made that just skyrocket. But I also would love to talk about your time as a management consultant. You left that work to start your own gig, if you will, your own business. The questions I have are, what did you do as a management consultant? Since you weren't working with startups, you must have been working with bigger businesses. And what made you leave? What made you decide, you know what, it's time to do my own thing?
Well, I'll answer the second question first because it's easier. It was 100% travel.
Ah,
And my wife and I were making the most of it to where, I mean, we'd be like peas and carrots on the weekends, but that's just not any kind of, it's just not sustainable. I did that for over 4 years
mm,
continuously, and that's just not sustainable. So, I mean, I just absolutely love that work.
mm-hmm.
And so, but, even right when I got into it, I was looking for a way to get out.
Oh,
And the
wow.
way out for me was not to be an employee again. That was not what I wanted. I wanted to have my own business.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my wife and I wanted a structure for our own backyard. In that process, we had a pretty decent marketing background. My wife and I had some success with another online business where I had sold things on the phone before from online leads, and so we learned about this business up in Pennsylvania, and one thing led to another, and then the next thing, we had a website. The original website was Amish Designers, and we had that going for a couple of years before we realized that wasn't really the right identity, and we created American Landscape Structures from that.
Mm-hmm. And so you took that business from the sort of the model, I guess, from Pennsylvania, and then you've made and especially this year during the pandemic, it skyrocketed. Can you tell me what happened? How did that happen?
Well, I'll give credit where credit's due. So the market definitely helped us, but I think the more interesting part of the equation is that I going back to 2019, I was stuck myself. I talk a lot about being stuck, and I've been there. And so what I started on was I was just on a growth journey. So I read a John Maxwell book, 15 Laws of Growth, and my wife and I started going through that together. And so that's when I really woke up and said, when I started this business, I got so busy working in the business. It's not that I was oblivious to growth. I mean, I've been growth minded my whole life until I started my own business.
Huh.
So I basically became like my consulting clients, and that I was so busy working in the business, I wasn't working on growth and learning anymore like I used to be. And so that year, I just started on a whole new path. I up leveled the people that I was hanging out with. In this case, virtually mostly. I went national. I hired a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I hired the best coach that I thought I could afford at that time to challenge me and lead me and guide me and give me ideas. And I've continued to up level the people that I spend time with that can speak into my life. And so what that led up to is the end of 2019. We started looking at our numbers again. I became like my client. I wasn't really looking at my numbers the way I know. And so I really picked apart and really dove into our metrics and said, what knobs do we need to turn to double the business? And so I looked at those numbers and came to the conclusion that doubling the business was realistic. And so with not just the vision, but the actual hard numbers behind it, we made some changes. We worked very, very hard on our sales conversation. So, we're selling on the phone. So that sales conversation is absolutely critical. So I spent probably 50 hours in online sales training to help change our sales conversation. Another thing I did is I hired a copywriter to help me with a landing page and to do some testing. And so that process of testing, we just made some tweaks to our landing page that paid off in a major way. And then also I hired my first assistant, which I waited way too long to do that. And then I also hired a salesperson to help carry the load because I had just been doing everything myself, just crazy. I had tried hiring people before, and just at that particular, like 2019, it was just me. And so anyway, all those things together. So we did a number of things proactively to grow the business. We set the goal of doubling the business, and then in March, our pipeline just evaporated.
Right.
And so that's where the story began of of COVID.
Wow. So I I love that you were realistic about the numbers, and I come back to what numbers, right? What were you looking at that you said we can double the business? What does doubling the business mean? Double the number of structures you put up, doubling your profit? What does all that mean? And how did you decide that you could double the business?
So in our case, it was specifically doubling the sales. It was not doubling. It was not doubling the profit in this case because we did drop our pricing down just a bit intentionally,
Uh huh.
and we did the math on that. Um, so we doubled our sales, and so the way that looks is we looked at the market. We figured the market was going to stay the same,
Uh huh.
and so what our numbers look like is the amount of traffic that we have. We have about 1,000 visitors a week right now, and so we look at the amount of traffic, the number of leads, the number of sales, the average dollar value of sale, and then you multiply all that out, and you end up with the dollar of sales, and then you got your gross profit margin, and then underneath your gross profit margin, you got your expenses, and then you got your bottom line. And so, that's how we those are the numbers that we looked at. We looked at the 2018 numbers, we looked at the 2019 numbers, and then we looked at the projected 2020 numbers. And the really amazing thing about that is that if you get two of those numbers firing together, then you get instead of like an addition effect, you get a multiplication effect. If you
Hmm.
get two numbers that you can increase, then that's where you can have a a very dramatic effect. I know, like, one of the first things I would always go do, going back to, when I first started doing consulting in 1999, one of the very, very first things I would do is I would do an exercise with the client, and I would ask them this question. I would say, so your profit for, um, I would have their financials, and I'd say your profit for last year was $120,000, right? And so this is I'm looking right at their financials. And so if you, knowing what you know about your numbers, if you grow your business by 10%, what's the impact going to be on your profit? And so most people would say, well, it's going to increase the profit by about 10%. Some people might say, well, 15 or 20%. And if you actually do the numbers, it's usually more often a 10% increase in business will usually more often yield more closer to a 40% increase in profit.
What? Wait, how? How does that work?
So if you can kind of follow along here, I've
Uh
got an
huh.
example. Just picture $1 million company.
Okay.
Okay. Now this is fictitious, but just to keep it simple, 30, 30, 30, 10. So that's 30% labor, 30% materials, 30% overhead, and 10% profit.
Okay.
Okay. And so in a traditional example, most people, right, wrong, or indifferent, if you just look at labor as being variable, and you look at materials as obviously being variable. So you got 60% there, 30 and 30.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then 30% overhead. So that overhead is fixed. You can fix that overhead by decisions, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
controllable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you take your $1 million and you increase your sales by 100,000. Are you with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so your cost of sales is that 60%. Okay. So that's 60,000. Okay. And your increased gross profit, your sales minus your cost of sales, is 40,000. You with me so far?
Sure.
Okay. And so 10% of a million is 100,000, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We just said your gross profit went up by 40,000. Now, this is a lot easier to understand, with a whiteboard or a piece of paper and a pen or whatever.
No,
But,
no, no.
as
I
for
get it.
instead of listening on a podcast, but it is a very simple example. And so it's just really simple math.
It's
But
so
most people
interesting.
don't realize it. And so they're frustrated and they're overwhelmed and they think they have to just, do all this effort and work to to, dramatically increase their profit. And so that usually right there is just a very motivating conversation.
It's so interesting that you say that because I think what was going on with me, listening to the math and having to explain it, is that I was going, okay, it wasn't that I was looking for it to be 40,000, which is 40% of the 100,000 for profit. And I love that I'm getting to arithmetic geek out here for a second. It's that I was actually thinking that it should be 400,000 because I was thinking that it should be a factor of the $1,000,000, which is the whole amount of money, rather than just the profit, which is 100,000. Do you see what I mean? That's why I was like, wait, what? How did that happen? So I can absolutely see the 40,000 because of how that worked. Because the 100,000 is the profit from $1,000,000 that we started with, if it's 10% profit. But I think there is the psychology behind that is fascinating to me, because all of a sudden I'm going, wait, it's my own preconceived notion of what you were talking about rather than the reality of what you were talking about. And I'm wondering, have you experienced that with other people you've talked to, people who maybe have a better grasp on these things, or maybe not as good a grasp as I just displayed, since I'm relatively new to looking at it this way? What has happened to people? You said it's motivating, but have other people had misconceptions about what was possible when you were talking about this with them?
Uh, Pretty much across the board
Huh.
of the clients that I met, is that, so if you kind of think in terms of language,
Mm-hmm.
okay, people can relate to language, and
Mm-hmm.
imagine yourself taking, I know you're multilingual, aren't you? Don't you
I
know
am.
like 5 languages or something like that? Well, I'm not. Like, I took a year of Spanish in college, and I'm be embarrassed to even try to speak Spanish in a Mexican restaurant. Um, and so if you go to a foreign, if I go, not you, but if I go to a foreign country, it's a little bit intimidating. Um, I would try to learn as much as I can. I'd get some CDs or DVDs or whatever, and try to learn, to be able to order food and get where I'm going and things like that. But it's still kind of intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and so that's kind of where people know when they go into business, they're not going to go into business if they don't know how to sell, right? I
Oh, I
mean,
disagree with you. I completely disagree with you. That's the thing. I think that honestly, people go into business all the time without having any idea how to sell, or if they, and this is I'm talking a lot about creatives right now. They know how to do their creative part, but I don't know that they know how to sell. And that's something that, like, having watched a lot of Zig Ziglar and done a lot of reading and a lot of research, I still don't really know how to sell. I'm very happy and lucky in that people tend to come to me when they want something. But as far as going to sell, I think I don't know. I'm honestly, and no disrespect intended, Jim, but I honestly think there are a lot of people out there who don't have any idea how to do it, and that's why people like you can help, because you know how to do it.
yeah. Yeah, so point taken. So I guess I was thinking in terms of my own backyard. The people that I had met had survived a financial crisis and they were
Mm-hmm.
still in business. I worked a lot in the aftermath of financial crisis. One was 2001 and the other one was 2008. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so they had survived that. So
Mm-hmm.
they had some ability to sell, but absolutely, one of the things that I help people with and help myself with as well is, I mean, I've been working on my sales conversation since I was delivering Washington Post when I was 14 years old. I mean, I have been working on it just nonstop.
Right.
And again, that was one of the major things that we worked on. And what you're alluding to is that people, they know how to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're a musician, you know how to play. If you're a painter, you know how to paint. But they underestimate the marketing and the sales. But one thing for sure that nearly everyone underestimates is they're basically illiterate when it comes to numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And when you figure that when you look at your bank statement, what's there, right? It's that the bank balance is a number. And so everything that leans into what that bank balance is a bunch of numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's is that you can get started in business based on really knowing what you're doing and whatever your trade is or whatever your talent is. And so what most people do is they get started and they just make decisions by intuition, which when you're relatively small and things are fairly uncomplicated, that works okay,
Mm-hmm.
until it doesn't.
Right.
You get to a certain level of a certain level of complexity, the decisions start getting bigger dollar values involved,
Mm-hmm.
like my $32,000 decision to buy that pavilion visualizer, and your your and so your instincts don't serve you anymore, and so you really there's a much higher level need of information. Now again, for me to go, like, I want to go to Switzerland, right? So I don't need to become fluent in French to go to Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they speak a couple of other languages over there
German.
too, so
Yeah. They.
German. So I don't need to be fluent in a foreign language. Just like I have a nephew in special forces, I think their goal is to try to get to like fifth grade, or I'm sorry, 5 years old is
Mm-hmm.
where they start at, so that they can converse somewhat,
Mm-hmm.
not to be fluent. So when they go to language school, they just want to be able to converse. And so, as a business owner, you don't have to be an expert in finance and numbers, but you do need to be able to converse. Does that make sense?
Sure. Sure.
If you
Absolutely.
want to survive, if you want to
Yeah.
survive, at
Well.
some point at some point, something happens to every business owner that makes it, that they realize that it's just sometimes they don't, sometimes they make it and sometimes they don't.
Okay. I love that because it's sort of, here's the thing. I personally, part of it might be that English isn't my first language. I look at profit, whatever, all of the numbers. I look at all of that. I look at what it all means, and it's very confusing because it's almost never consistent across the line. What
Mm-hmm.
something means in one place is it's called by another name in another place. So what I'm hearing you say is that it works by intuition, and I'm a small business, I'm a single person business. It works by intuition up to a point, and then you have to sort of almost get serious and become a 5 year old in the language. So, what would you recommend for someone who's going, okay, I'm ready to get serious. I'm ready to take my business to the next level. I might want to hire an assistant in the next year. I want to maybe double my business, whatever the goals are. What do you recommend as the next best step? Once you're ready to not just be intuitive about it anymore, what's the first step you should take?
So going back to my analogy of going to Switzerland, like with my wife and I've actually talked about this. And we also talked about going, well, Ireland's not a good example because they speak sort of English there. Um,
They
um,
on the West Coast they speak Gaeltacht, but
yeah.
they speak English most places. Yeah.
Anyway, when we go to Europe, we're going to hire a guide.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the answer. So um, we're we don't have the date set, but we're going to be launching Profit Speak soon. And so it's a very low risk, low cost way to get started to learn the language. And the really cool thing about it is that you don't need to know the language for every business out there. That's really overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm at that level. Like I could walk into pretty much any business
Mm-hmm.
in a couple of days. I can get a very good handle on the numbers. So, but you don't have to. A business owner doesn't have to do that. You can get a handle on your numbers relatively quickly, in a group environment. If the stakes are higher and you have somebody's got 20, 25 employees, and there's a lot of the time there's a lot of money laying around, there's a lot of waste and a lot of opportunity there, then it might make sense to have someone like myself come in face to face and work directly with your people.
Mm-hmm.
Or these days it's more virtual. Actually have me spend some time looking at your financials, talking to your people, so on and so forth. But a lot of folks just doing that, just 5 session, using some tools, working with just their numbers, talking to some other business owners, talking to me, and just over a 10-week period. And it's a great time because you don't have to have everything mapped out for the year ahead of time. by the end of February, the end of March, they could have a very solid plan to be able to make much, much better decisions moving forward. And not only that, but to really be able to fire themselves up and fire their team up with
Mm-hmm.
the promise of what's really not only possible, but likely if they know where to focus. So that's a big, big subject. There's been books written about it. Is knowing where to focus is super, super critical. So we not only talk about numbers, but like one of my favorite books out there that I used to teach a lot is The Goal by Ellie Goldratt. And so he came up with something called the theory of constraints. And just the summary of that is like, where do you need to focus your time and your energy and your efforts to get the biggest result? And so that's what the theory of constraints is all about. What business owners do almost without fail is they have so many priorities, they have no priorities. They're working on getting more sales, they're working on getting more work out. They've got to do something over here with the accounting. They've got to talk to their insurance guy. They've got to talk to their attorney. They've got to put fires out with their customer. They're doing all this stuff. And they're doing a lot of different things to try to improve in a lot of different areas. But they don't know where that real leverage point is. And that's where, again, with a $1-2 million business or even a $500,000 business, that's where it's just absolutely essential to know where that leverage point is.
Okay. Most of what you said, I understood. The thing that I don't, it sounds to me like when you're talking about helping people figure out the focus of what they're doing, you need to develop some sort of a plan, right? Is that part of what a business owner should do? Like, I'm going to focus on cutting costs. That's what my focus is. And then once I've dealt with that, I'm going to focus on the processes in my business. And once I'm done doing that, I'm going to focus on the gross profit. Or is there some other way? Like, what is the proper way once you choose a focus? And it sounds like you, and when you work with people, you help them choose a focus. But once you choose a focus and you've done that, what happens next?
Yeah. So I think the crux of your question is that happens working together
Mm-hmm.
is as you start to learn your numbers and you start to use your numbers to know where those focus areas on. So it changes. So
Mm-hmm.
you open a bottleneck up in one area. So for instance, I worked with a shed company. Their bottleneck was clearly production. Okay. So we opened that area up and then, and we did that relatively quickly. They had their scheduling board on something the size of a desk calendar. And so when we opened that up and got more intentional about the production, they were able to get a lot more production done just by basically giving it more thought, paying more attention to it. And so then we changed the focus over to sales.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started bringing more sales in. And so again, that was another incident with that shed company I worked with that they, from 2019 to 2020, they actually doubled their profits. And so the process that I go through it's basically 3 steps. And so the first step is to gather information.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that information is numbers. Some of that information is just watching and observing what's going on. Some of that information comes out of conversation. It could have to do with relationships. It can have to do with behavior. It can have to do with attitudes. It can have to do with belief systems. It can have to do with a lot of different things. So gathering information. The second step, so that's G. The second step is analyze. And so by analyzing that information, you can really drill in and find out where your bottleneck or constraint is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the last is prioritize. So it's GAP: gather, analyze, and prioritize. So when you analyze, you're putting numbers to the different opportunities for improvement. You come up with your missed opportunities and your problems, and you get all those outlined. And then the third step is you prioritize. And so you prioritize where you're going to get your biggest bang for the buck, which is going to be wherever your bottleneck is.
So that's where you would start.
Yeah, you start with your bottleneck, and then once you fix that bottleneck, the bottleneck moves, or the constraint. It's those two terms are used pretty much interchangeably. The constraint changes.
The
So
thing
within a
that's causing
production
the
line,
problem. Is that what you're
yes,
talking about?
yes.
Okay.
So in a
Okay. Uh-huh.
production line,
Mm-hmm.
it can move from one place in the production line to another place in the production line, or within the business, it can move from production to where production is getting caught up. So the sales backlog, the orders that are sold but not yet complete, the sales backlog is now going down. And so the constraint within the business is now sales. We have to go out and create more sales. And then another potential constraint is cash. And so sometimes you can go out and get a lot more sales. And depending upon some different issues within the business, then the cash can get short where they're having a hard time getting the work out, which is then, causing even more cash problems. And so we have a cash management process that we use to help people get through
Mm-hmm.
that issue and get that back opened up again. So it goes between, and this is where the plan comes in. You need a 2-3 page plan, no more than that. And you need to look at sales, operations, and finance. Just very, very simple. No more complicated than that. And to have a plan for sales, how you're going to get work, how you're going to do work, and then how you're going to keep score.
Get work, do work, keep score. That it sounds simple enough, even though I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would be listening to this who would be going, "Yeah, right. Like I could figure all that out." And if you are a person who's an entrepreneur or a small business owner, and you're looking for the constraint or the bottleneck, but I guess the question is, what if you're getting by? What if you're okay? What if you know your numbers and you're okay, but you want to grow what you're doing into something bigger? How would you approach that? If somebody came to you and said, "Look, I'm doing okay, but I feel like I want to grow and I feel like I know my numbers. Is there something else I could be doing? And if so, what is it?" What do you think
Yeah, so
about
I
that?
think pretty much any business owner, another set of eyes is going to help.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I've yet to find a business that I could go into that I couldn't find money. And if all I do is validate, like, "Hey, man, you got it nailed," I mean, that has value.
Mhm.
That hasn't happened with me yet. There's always money there, and in fact, and again, this is a hypothetical question, right? In fact, if somebody, the more capability somebody has, many times the bigger the potential opportunity can be to open things up.
Mhm.
It's even within a team. So to be really successful, to have your success optimized means that you have to have a team, right? So a solopreneur is not going to be optimized.
Mhm.
Like one of the biggest steps for a solopreneur to take is to get a virtual assistant,
Right.
right? And so, that's a relatively simple business. And even there's always opportunities to optimize.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it seems to me like I'm looking for a virtual assistant now, and looking for someone who understands what you're trying to do, is excited about what you're trying to do, and has the skills that you need in order to help you grow. I need to get Chelsea Brinkley on here so we can talk about that, because I think it's such an important topic,
Mm-hmm.
especially for creatives. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I wanted to ask you is, within like, this person needs to grow, or they want to grow, even they want to grow their business, they have a virtual assistant, or they don't. That part's not the issue here, but I'm wondering about resistance. How often do you walk into a place and somebody asks for your help, right? They said, "I want to hire you to help me with this, and I want to grow my business." How often do you meet resistance from the people who actually said they wanted your help, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, so it would actually be the exception that there would not be resistance.
Really?
So the situations that I walked into, again, it's not so much anymore because my business model, doing consulting on my own, is a lot softer on the clients than when I was an employee. But people are scared, and they're also a little embarrassed. right? Because nobody, I mean, again, going back to me in the Mexican restaurant, like I'm embarrassed to say, gracias, because like that's as far as it goes. It's embarrassing.
Oh,
And
I'm
so
sorry
here
to
it
hear
is. I
that.
have here it is. I have a business, and and I'm struggling somewhat, or I'm enjoying some financial success, but I want to do better, and I know I can do better anyway. Yeah, so it's really very rare that there's not some kind of resistance. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, what we do to overcome that is, and I've done this over and over and over again, is we get started and we gather some information and we come up with a plan. But one of the first things that we do is we find out what that biggest opportunity is. And when they see that they're leaving $100,000, $200,000 on the table with one opportunity, then that resistance goes away.
Okay, so
So
it's the promise of what they could get to that helps people overcome how they're resisting or what they're resisting.
yeah, so people are frustrated. I mean, it's hard to run a business and not have the right skills and knowledge that you need in every area. I mean, one person doesn't know it all. And where do you go to even learn this stuff?
Right?
It's seriously, there,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I actually bought the book. Um, I bought the book Finance for Non-Financial Managers. In the table of contents is like 8 pages. Like my clients are not going to read that book. And even if they did, it's not going to help them. And so, it's a challenging area, but, um, going back to, well, I'll tell you just a quick story about this truck repair company I worked with. He was scared to death. He had just built a new building, and I think he signed a note for like $2 million. And he wasn't sleeping. He was getting up, going to work at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and he wasn't sleeping anyway. I mean, he yelled at his operations manager for not making the coffee, like right in front of us. I mean, this guy was on edge. And turned out he was scared to death about being able to pay for this new building that he built,
Right.
on top of not sleeping. And so it took us a few days, but we realized that there's an opportunity there. He wasn't billing for the guy's time. He had 6 techs. They were working 40 hours a week,
Mm-hmm.
and he was only billing for 53% of their time, we found out. And then also he discovered the solution. So we, in a meeting in his conference room, talked about, well, all you have to do is get more information from the techs on each one, and increase your billing. And there was like $200,000-$300,000 a year, just right there.
That's
So
a
he
beautiful
was
thing.
excited. Yeah, he was really excited. So he went from being really, really angry, super. And this guy's a little scary too. He was Olympic weightlifter,
Oh,
so he's
wow.
kind of intimidating. He kind of
Right.
scared me one time. He kind of snapped at me one time and
Yikes.
scared me a little. So, yeah, so he was excited. After a couple of days, he was a little nervous. The end of the second day, we showed him the plan. He was still a little nervous, but once we got through that first exercise and he started looking at, the key is his numbers. Like going to class is boring, and so that's what's cool about the workshop that we have, is that I'll engage with you as much as you'll engage with me. If you want to share your numbers with me, we don't have to share them with the whole group. You can share your numbers with me, and you'll get some information back, and you'll get to know your numbers. You don't have to know. You don't have to be fluent, but if you can just get a basic working knowledge of your own numbers, I promise you that there is money there that you had no idea was there.
That's a beautiful thing to hear, I'm sure. I'm curious about something. First of all, I would love to know how, if somebody's going, yeah, I have a business and I'd love to know more about this workshop, where where does someone find that information? Where is Profit Speak? Where will, actually, by the time this episode airs, it's sometime in late January, early February. So
Perfect.
where is Profit Speak right now? If I want to go, hey, I want to sign up, where is it?
Yeah, so go to jimadamsconsulting.com. There's some free stuff there. You can sign up to get some of our templates. You can sign up for our newsletter. you can call me or email me, and we don't have it scheduled yet. So you get on our mailing list, and we would let you know when that's going to be. It's going to be less than $500, and and that's going to include a couple of 30-minute coaching calls. We really just want to get to know you and your business and get you some value. And then again, you can go there, and we've got a business model template that you can download there for free. That's not going to apply to every business, but at least it gives you an idea of what a business model template looks like. You just have to get 5, 6 numbers together off of your tax return, and to give you a picture of where you're starting, and then also to give us a place for us to start a conversation.
Okay. Um, I appreciate you saying that because if somebody wants to at least begin to look at their numbers, it sounds like that template is a good place to begin, provided they have their tax returns and can find that information. Some people don't. Some people have a lot of trouble with that. So if you're one of the people who has trouble with that, maybe we can start some sort of a support group because I do. I also have trouble with that. I did want to ask you something about the guy with the trucking company, and that is this: when he went, okay, I have to bill for all of their time, right? So instead of 53%, all of a sudden it was going to be 100% of these techs' time. He all of a sudden was almost doubling what he was charging his customers. Am I right in that? If he starts all of a sudden billing for their time in this way, how do you recommend someone does that? Like, oh, I'm raising my rates. I'm a consultant and I'm raising my rates, or I have a business and all of a sudden what you were paying $53,000 a year for is now going to be $100,000 a year because I'm going to be charging for these people's time that I haven't been charging for. What would you recommend someone who has a business do to get their customers on board with something like that? Because it seems kind of sudden to me, and personally I'd be like, wait, what? You're charging me more? Why? What happened?
Okay, so there's two questions there. One was a specific instance, and I'll start off with that first. So
Mm-hmm.
what it was is that the techs were not putting enough information down on the work order for him to basically be able to tell the story to the client to justify that they had spent 5, 6 hours working on that vehicle. And
Mm-hmm.
so they were only charging like 3 hours when they should have been, when he was working on it for 6,
Mm-hmm.
and should have been charging for 6.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as the client knew what it was that they were doing, then they wouldn't question it.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't. So that actually happened. He actually did. He didn't go to 100%, but he got up to 80% by being more thorough with the billing.
Mm-hmm.
But now the second question is about the elasticity in the pricing, and so like that would be a subject for a session. So because there's different things involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
So like for example, one thing is your messaging. So the messaging and your branding and things like that. How is the value of what you do coming across to your customer? How is it being aimed at what their exact needs are? Do you even know what their needs are? Things like that. Your sales conversation is another part of it. So if you have a lame sales conversation, or your salespeople are out there on their milk run and they're not really getting new customers. The other thing is the quality of the customers that you have. A lot of businesses need to fire some customers and go out and get some new customers. There's a lot of variables that go into that.
Mm-hmm.
As far as being able to improve your margins, basically.
So it sounds like it's individualized. What you might need to be looking at in that arena is very unique to you and your business.
Yeah, and so that's what's really awesome about the whole process is how individualized it is. What I would
Mm-hmm.
warn people about, and I'm still looking for a way to tackle this, is like trying to educate yourself on the subject of finance and numbers in general is kind of tough because there's so many different types of businesses, and then every individual, like every heating and air business is a little bit different. There's similarities, but each one is different. There's different people, there's different strengths, every business is different.
Uh-huh.
And And so, but that's the real beauty of it, is that you can take, you can take your strengths and you can identify your weaknesses and really create, make your business and create a business that's just so much more than it is right now.
I love the way you said that, and it's interesting because what I keep coming back to a couple of different words that I think you're pinging on for me, which are self awareness, self knowledge, and courage. Because you need to know yourself and what you're capable of, and what your business is, and what your business does, and what it could do almost objectively. You can't lie to yourself if you're going to grow your business, it sounds like. What do you think about that? What do you think about the idea of radical honesty with yourself when it comes to this stuff?
Well, I'll take it a step further than that. And that is because again, I was guilty of this. And, and that is to take the time to think. How are you going to make some white space in your calendar to give yourself time to think and solve problems?
Mm-hmm.
So I've like taken that to a whole other level. I've got a tool that I use now. And so,
Jim? Oh,
sorry,
that's
I
okay.
had, I
Did you
had,
mute yourself?
I did, I did. So,
So the last thing that came through was I've got a tool that I use now.
yes, yes. So I use Trello, and so that keeps me organized.
Mm,
And so when I go to bed, I know like 5:45 the next morning. Like for example, this morning I knew that there was this landing page that I needed to work on.
mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get a new landing page created for the upcoming year to test out. And so I knew that I had to do a revision on that. I had to write some copy. I have to go research some pictures. So that was my task, because I know I'm not going to do that very well with the phone ringing and people knocking on my door, interrupting me and things like that. So to have time to think
Mm-hmm.
is that no more than you would, you're not going to try to make one of your beautiful paintings with all these distractions. Or, I mean, maybe you would, I don't know, but it seems to me like you would take some time to really imagine, like, what is it that you're even going to paint?
Oh,
You know?
absolutely. I think any creative of any sort, and I think a lot of what you're talking about, honestly, is in that same place of being agile and being adaptable. And that's what I think about creativity in general, is that it lets us be agile, adaptable, and flexible. And that notion of taking time for yourself to envision, to plan, to systematize those things that you're talking about. It's just as important for a creative person versus someone who isn't using their powers of creativity in the moment. But it's still really important. I see that very much what you're talking about. We have to take that time. The question is, I guess there's a psychology at work here. My question to you is, how do you prioritize that for yourself? What are you doing? What are you, Jim Adams, doing to prioritize that thinking time? How do you set aside all the other demands on your time and your energy?
So there's a couple things at play. First of all entrepreneurs are creatives, whether
Absolutely.
they realize it or not. Okay. The most successful entrepreneurs are creatives. I mean, even if you think about Bill Gates, like the most brilliant thing he ever did is, he didn't even create DOS. He just saw the need for it and put the two things together, and boom, Microsoft happened. Right. So we're all creatives. So the
Absolutely.
second part of it is, the reason I know what to work on is numbers. And I have a specific example. So I have a vision, and I'm about halfway through creating a brand new 56-page catalog. Okay. That is on hold right now. And the reason why it's on hold is because I know my numbers, and I know from experience, and I know from numbers, and I know from tracking that that catalog has a lot less leverage than the two new salespeople that I just hired, that I'm going to be training in the next 10 weeks. Okay. And also, that landing page that I just talked to you about has a lot more potential to feed those new sales reps and to get them more leads than that catalog. That catalog, maybe that's like more of an ego thing. Like it would feel really good to get that completed. But when it comes right down to it, like I could just take the form off the website for the catalog and it really, really wouldn't make that big of a difference. We've got an online version that is fine for most people. We could just quit mailing out catalogs. But I know that from information. That's not my gut telling me that. I know that from tracking information and seeing people that have actually bought structures and which of them got catalogs and which of them didn't.
Again, it's about knowing your numbers. And you know, the more I talk to you, Jim, the more I'm like, okay, I need to go figure out my numbers. And I agree
Well,
with
and
you. Go ahead.
it's
Go
not
ahead.
just numbers. It's not just numbers. It's numbers. It's also information. Numbers is like a little sterile, and then people are afraid of math. I'm no good at math, all that kind of stuff. It's information
Okay.
and what to do with it.
Yeah, and it's information that you have to be honest with yourself about, and that brings me back to that thought earlier about radical honesty about what you're doing and about what you're trying to achieve. And I think that, yeah, I agree with you completely. And I also wanted to just say, I'm so grateful that you said that you believe everyone's creative. That is so wonderful. All entrepreneurs are creative, and I think many of us who aren't entrepreneurs are also creative. We all have our own unique creative genius, and I'm thrilled that you said that because I think it's super important. I did want to ask you this idea of information. A lot of us are afraid, right? A lot of us are afraid of digging down and finding out what's actually going on. You know, there's a little bit of a la 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 la, I can't see it, I can't hear it, la 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 la. What if someone is not at a place, you know, they don't have a $500,000 business or $1 million business or whatever, and they're not ready to go to Profit Speak with you? What could they do to start, you know, stopping the la 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 and to start really being honest with themselves about that information? What would you say? Okay, you're not ready for Profit Speak, you're not ready to work with me yet, but let me give you some advice on what to start with. What would you say to someone like that?
The thought that comes to mind is that sounds kind of like a personal growth matter,
Mm-hmm.
you know, based on my own personal experience, is to, if you broaden out what you're thinking and if you take the time to think, the resources that you need will come to you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not because some of the things you're talking about, there's lots of different resources out there. And so the question that you ask is, and I'm stealing this from Tony Robbins, is it's a resourcefulness issue.
Mm-hmm.
Is that if you really want to be an entrepreneur, or you really want to have a great life, one of the biggest keys is being resourceful. And so if you're taking that time for yourself and you're working on your growth and you're resourceful, then the right resources will come to you and you will create what you need. And so that could come in many forms. Like I've been exposed to many teachers since this more recent growth journey started. And so, you know, when you open yourself up, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
I agree with you in principle, absolutely. It's just, you know, as I work a lot with companies who are looking to innovate. That's when I go to a company to speak or to run one of my workshops, it's because they want to be more agile and more adaptable, and they want to innovate. And so I'm looking at that perspective, right? The perspective of we need to be receptive to all sorts of ideas and all sorts of ways of thinking. And the perspective that you're advocating, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that all of that is well and good, and you still need to have the bottom line information. And so I love that this other perspective is you make it accessible, you know, and I think that I'm so grateful to you for making it so accessible over this last hour that we've been chatting, because I know a lot of people who are scared about it. I know a lot of people who are nervous about looking at those numbers because either they won't like what they see or that the numbers will swim in front of their faces and they won't make any sense. So I want to say thank you for being part of this conversation and bringing so much value. And I also would love it if you would give the rest of your. You had a bunch of different social media things. I know jimadamsconsulting.com. So if you're listening and you want to know more about Jim Adams and the work that he's doing to help businesses thrive, you should go there. And there's also the business model template, and that is jimadamsconsulting.com/BOE. And then I'd love it if you could give LinkedIn if somebody wants to connect with you there, and also Facebook if somebody wants to find you there, so that people can follow you and your new big fans can get to know more about the work you're doing to help businesses.
Oh, as far as exactly what my links are, oh, I'm sorry. I don't have those at my fingertips.
That's okay. You know what? You're thinking bigger picture, and I like that. So what I'll do then is I'll put those in the show notes, and that way we'll have you'll have the access to that. And also I'm going to mention the books that you mentioned and the people that you mentioned, like Tony Robbins, like Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, all of those different books, which are really good as far as opening up your mindset. I think if you want to think differently about yourself and about your business and about your ability to tame your business and grow your business, those books are great places to start. So Jim, I was going to ask you this one thing. Is there anything else that you think that someone should know about this topic that we haven't covered?
As far as information in business, let's see, one thing. I would just summarize by saying this is that this subject more than any other, and it's why I chose, like, I mean, I've sold a lot of product in my lifetime, and I've spent a lot of time helping people get more workout. And one of the reasons why I chose to highlight numbers is because of just how incredibly difficult it is to sort out for a business owner. Just every business owner that I met, going all the way back to 1999, just their eyes glaze over when you start talking numbers, and it's intimidating and scary, and it's been made to be that way. The the way financial statements are formatted and everything for taxes is very confusing. It doesn't serve businesses very well. And so just being able to find a way to sort through, to just chunk down as simple as possible your numbers. It doesn't have to be that scary. You're not alone, basically, is I guess is what I want to say. You're not alone. Almost every entrepreneur faces this and gets to the point that they have to do something about it. And just if it's not me, get somebody else to guide you through your numbers.
Because it's important. It's important to know them and be honest with yourself about them. It's so true. I agree with you 100%. And you've inspired me to look at my own numbers for, for the coming year. I will no longer hide my head in the sand. Jim, again, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I have a question that I ask everybody who comes on the show. It's a silly question, but I find that it yields some poignant answers. And the question is this: if you had a plane that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
Wow. No warning, huh?
Nope. First thing
Okay.
that comes to mind.
I would just say know your numbers.
There you
I'd
go.
like to come up with something more profound and meaningful and and heartfelt than that, but that's what comes to mind.
And that's the thing is, if we talk about that, and because know your numbers, it's poignant and it's simple and it is to the point, because if you know that, there's a lot of comfort in it, even if it's a little scary as you're going through it. I imagine that there is comfort in knowing where you stand. You know, to me, there's something really powerful about that. I talk about that with rock bottom. People think of rock bottom as a bad thing. I actually think of rock bottom as a good thing, because you may have been falling and falling and falling on unstable ground, but for the first time, when you hit rock bottom, you're standing on a stable foundation. And so even if you're afraid of your numbers, it sounds like, my goodness, knowing what they are gives you that firm foundation on which you can build. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, it can be scary to know where you are, but it's not like you have no idea. I mean, you know what your bank balance is, but what's really, really exciting is what it could be.
Absolutely. And that's the point, is that where you are is not where you're going to stay. And if Jim's around to help you, then you're going to be able to grow. And I think that's really cool. So, Jim, once again, thank you so much for being here. I could talk with you for the next 6 hours, but I know you have a life to get back to. And the next travel thing to plan in your RV. We didn't even talk about your traveling. I'm so sorry we didn't get a chance to do that because I'm a huge traveler myself. But maybe you'll come back again and we'll talk a little bit more about what it's like to work while you're on the road. Until then,
that would be fun.
Yeah, it would be. I'd love to have you back. Until then, though, Jim, thank you once again. And if you have enjoyed this episode of the Innovative Mindset Podcast, you got to let me know. I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a review where you listen, or you can comment on the show notes. Let me know what you're thinking. If you want to get in touch with Jim, you now know how to do that from jimadamsconsulting.com. Until next time, next week, we're going to be talking about some really cool stuff about creatives and burnout and what it means if you are a creative with burnout, and how you can use creativity to get through burnout. It's going to be a chock full episode, and it's going to be me solo. I don't have an interview next week. But I think it'll be really interesting for you to listen to. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg, once again for the Innovative Mindset Podcast, reminding you to listen, learn, laugh, and love a whole lot. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new. And if you like what you're hearing, please review it and rate it and let other people know. And if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, I'd love to meet you on patreon.com/innovative mindset. I also have lots of exclusive goodies to share just with the show's supporters there. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2021. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, keep living in your innovative mindset.